Welcome, guys. Welcome back to Minko's Corner. I'm I'm happy that you're back. Today we're not doing a Napoleon's video. I know. For some of you who know my schedule by now, I would alternate. I'll do a Napoleon's video or a Epic History TV video and something else. Today I'm gonna do let's see the channel's name, Monsieur Z. There you go, Mr. Z. He's doing is China the next global superpower? It's a geopolitical video. I'm very passionate about geopolitics. I want to learn more about it. I haven't watched this video, but I know a lot on the subject about China and how it's growing in power with the Belt and Road Project and with a plethora of different with the Uyghurs and all that. I know a good amount of it about China, but I want to know more. It's a very interesting subject to me, and yeah. So I hope we're gonna learn as much together, and let's watch the video.
This union, rising debt, aging infrastructure, dwindling industry, changing demographics, and more, the United States is speculated by many to be a falling country, one which will no longer be capable of exerting its superpower influence over the world and maintaining the global balance of order which has existed since the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991. Standing up to seize that role, many believe, is the People's Republic of China, a state which over the past 2 decades has demonstrated imposing military and economic growth. Paired with a shift from quiet development to aggressive political action and a slew of ambitious new agendas, the Chinese are at the very least attempting to reaffirm to the world China's ability to assume global dominance. But just how realistic are these ambitions, and how precisely did China get to this point? Today's video is sponsored by Ridge Wallet, the wallet of the future, today. Made of durable. Now, back to the video.
Dude,
The Chinese had
by the way, the whole Ridge Wallet thing, it's a fucking piece of metal.
historically been a great hub of trade and a leading power within their own sphere. Facing few external threats thanks to the natural barriers of the Himalayas to the southwest, the deserts of the northwest, the frigid temperatures of the northeast, and the Pacific Ocean to the broad east, China was able to develop a strong internal focus whilst leaving its markets open to foreigners and merchants who typically pose little to no threat to China itself. China had only ever fallen under foreign rule twice in its history, and both times had been to neighboring Asian powers residing within these barrier regions, and whose culture ultimately failed to dramatically change that of the dominant Han population, allowing the Han Chinese to consolidate their hold over China proper, and continually develop it into a more advanced state. The first of these conquering dynasties belonged to the Mongols, while the second belonged to the Manchus. Interestingly enough, these two foreign dynasties were responsible for bringing China to its largest geographic size, the later Manchus having been responsible for bringing China to perhaps its greatest economic height as well, prior to the collapse of the dynastic system. The Manchus had established the Qing dynasty and would achieve record heights for the country. China then standing among the largest empires of the time, rivaled only by Russia, Spain, and Britain, holding claim to the largest population on the planet, over a third of the world's total, and boasting the most powerful economy of the time by far with a GDP of 228 million, once again roughly a third of the world's total, and surpassing the whole of Western Europe combined, minus colonial possessions.
You need to say the
His achievements wouldn't last, however, as being an inwardly focused nation which left itself open to foreign trade with competitors who were rapidly advancing, whilst complacency with the then present state of things bred further internal stagnation, ultimately left China increasingly subject to the whims of the growing European powers. By the time it sought to take action against this rising foreign influence, it had already been too late, and the Europeans forced China to open itself wider and wider. The economies of Europe grew, as did their influence in Asia, while China slowly declined to the point of losing significant sovereignty to the Western powers and Japan in what was known as the Century of Humiliation. The Qing dynasty would fall in the early 1900s, being replaced by the Chinese Republic, who would be left the difficult task of picking up the broken pieces of the old empire which had fallen under the control of foreign powers, regional warlords, and independence movements. By 1930, a relative stability had been achieved within Republic-controlled lands, and work began on the building of foundations for a democratic system. However, the stability was shattered by a Japanese invasion of the Northeast and a Soviet invasion of the Northwest. During this time, China had been wrapping up a civil war against the Chinese Communist Party, and the Republic's leadership was forced to choose whether to combat the invading Japanese and achieve external security, or appease them and focus on achieving internal unity by defeating the Communists. Chinese nationalist leader Chiang Kai-shek opted for the latter, recognizing Japan as negotiable, while the Communists, on the other hand, stood in direct competition with the Republic for control of China. Chiang, however, was captured and coerced into cooperating with the Communists against Japan, thus beginning the
That's very interesting. I thought that because he saw the Japanese, I thought this was my initial point of view. I thought he thought a lot of thought here that he saw the Japanese as the major threat when compared to the Communist Party. That he decided, you know what, let's unite let's fight the Japanese first, let's secure the country, then we can fight each other. But that's interesting that he was coerced into fighting the Japanese. He wanted to fight, he wanted to negotiate with the Japanese, like give some territory or whatever. And sorry about that. And he wanted to fight the communists. It's very interesting.
Second Sino-Japanese War. The establishment government was forced to exhaust its manpower and resources, while the opportunistic communists used the Japanese war to regain ground and support. When the war against Japan came to an end and the Civil War resumed, the communists were able to turn the tables on the nationalists, driving them out of the mainland and into the island.
Okay, let's see. So they went from Nanking, they went to Canton, Chengdu, Xinjiang. By the way, if I'm pronouncing this wrong, whatever. Then they went from Xinjiang. So okay, so from Chengdu they separated. One group went to Xinjiang, and the rest went to Taipei. Okay.
Island of Taiwan, where they remain to this day as the Republic of China, while the communist mainland assumed the title of the People's Republic of China. Under the leadership of Mao Zedong, the PRC aimed to collect a wealth, though it had succeeded into a proper socialist state, going to extreme lengths to do so. The end result, though it had succeeded in boosting the industrial sector, was built on the bones of millions who lost their lives in the process, and even then the results still failed.
What's really interesting is that not many people know about this. The number of deaths, the people who died in the Second World War, we know a lot about either the Pacific, with the Japanese, or especially the European theater, the big theater, where, I don't know, 30 million, 27 million Russians died, 7 million, 8 million Germans. There's a huge numbers, and people always think about those two theaters, either the Asia Pacific theater or the European theater. But not many people think about the war that started in 1937 and it ended in 1935 between Japan and China, where tens of millions of Chinese died just in that war, and then then the Civil War continued with
to meet expectations.
Inside.
That said, the hard work had been done, and China rebounded over the next few decades, especially following the normalization of relations between Red China and the US in the 1970s. The Chinese, after experiencing the decline and collapse of an empire brought on by foreign interference, 2 wars with the Japanese, and now a breaking of relations with the USSR, made a hard return to their strategy of internal focus and relative isolation. The building of a new self-sufficient system was the goal, and such was slowly being achieved. However, as before, China would remain open to the merchants of the world so that it could draw in money from the outside world without spending it in return, investing this money instead on domestic industries. This became especially true as Sino-American relations improved and China took up the role of the global factory, mass-producing goods at cheap prices which enticed foreign businesses to invest more heavily in China. Maoist economics, though they had brought mass industry to China, came at a debilitating cost and had outlived their usefulness, as it became clear that China, despite its advances, was technologically behind its pro-Western Asian neighbors. The result was the adoption of market socialism, or quote, socialism with Chinese characteristics, the goal of which was to use elements of capitalism to advance China to a point at which, quote, true communism could be achieved. Since then, China's 5-year plans have consistently aimed to modernize China from a developing nation to a leading power in technology, economics, and military strength. Rapidly, China's cities grew, the country became more thoroughly interconnected by new infrastructure, and the GDP was shooting off to record heights, especially upon China's entry.
The real estate market in China is insane. I don't know if you guys have looked at it, but it's truly insane. The prices, you'd think that living in New York is expensive. It's New York City, you see all those houses go for $2-3 million, insane prices, right? But the real estate in China is multiple times much more expensive than the ones in New York. It's insane. By a factor of 10, of 20, it's crazy.
To the World Trade Organization. Membership in the WTO was meant to liberalize China and loosen the state's grasp over the economy, however has instead given China near unhindered access to the global marketplace while bypassing WTO regulations via loopholes and pure disregard. As a result, the manufacturing centers of the globe have declined as China fills worldwide product demands at dirt cheap prices which other industries can't compete with. By doing this, China has increased global dependency upon it while largely maintaining its own self-sufficiency. China's unfair practices were challenged during the Trump administration, escalating to the point of a trade war, during which the near-crippling dependency upon Chinese products was made clear, and a move toward American self-sufficiency, or at least greater independence from Chinese business, was made. Other nations have condemned China for a multitude of reasons, have grown weary of rising
Well, he found his microphone, finally, what the hell?
Chinese economic dominance, but hesitation has remained high across the West given how integrated China has become to the global economy. and the hefty demand this would place upon them to either revive their local industries or find a new world factory if China was to be gradually sidelined. By this point, China has become too deeply invested in its international ambitions to simply abandon them or allow them to be negated by the West. The days of quietly biding their time have passed, and China now feels that it must either demonstrate its abilities as a rising superpower, or allow itself to be confined to the status of a second-tier state forever in the shadow of the US and the former Soviet Union. China, having borne witness to the negative effects of the trade war upon its own economy and now facing the scrutiny of the world following the COVID pandemic, has slightly receded from the global stage to double down on the strategy of self-sufficiency, although that doesn't mean it's given up on becoming a world leader. China's strategy is best reflected by its latest 5-year plan. This plan emphasizes what it calls a dual circulation of trade, but in reality puts the production of domestic needs first and expands domestic demand for Chinese-made goods to maintain high economic momentum, whilst cutting back dependency on both foreign markets and foreign goods, without cutting them out entirely. This raising of domestic consumption, if it succeeds, could be expected to coincide with a growth of China's per capita GDP, as well as boost the standard of living within the PRC. According to the new plan and carryovers from the previous 5-year plan, the government is expected to play a greater role in managing the economy during this period to slowly shift China's production focus away from mass manufacturing and toward tech development, as well as introduce significant automation into the manufacturing field to keep production high and inexpensive, while still raising the standard of living by eliminating low-skilled jobs, creating more high-skilled jobs, and promoting closer integration of business and education. Through this shift toward technology, China hopes to make advancements in 5G, AI, biotech, and aerospace, which will secure it a place as not merely the low-cost factory of the world, but a technological giant looked up to by all other countries.
So that's one of the reasons why China is investing so heavily in Africa, because they wanna use Africa as China was used by the world, as its factory. They want to use Africa as the Chinese factory. You know how America and basically the world use China as a factory? Well, basically China wants to do the same with Africa. That's why they're investing so heavily, and they want to, it's very interesting how China is investing with its credit scheme in Africa, especially where basically what they will do is they will make a loan to a country that it's a very unstable. There are a lot of unstable governments in Africa, a lot of corrupt governments, and basically what will happen is they will give a loan, let's say $50 billion, to a country to build a port, for example, and then they will say to the country, listen, don't worry, just pay us. We're here. Don't worry. And then at some point, the country will be like, or the president will be like, listen, we can't pay you anymore. Our economy is too weak to pay you. What can we do? And China's like, no issue. The port that we built in your country for, we gave you 50 billion of credit for. We're gonna take that port for 100 years, 99 years. They did that in Sri Lanka, and I think they did the same in Ethiopia. I'm not sure about that. I'm sure about the one in Sri Lanka, though, about the port situation and influence. And influence for their Belt and Road Initiative, which is basically a revival of the ancient Silk Road that will connect China with the West through railways and the sea.
Further, China continues pressing forward with its Belt and Road system in a
Look at this. So they're gonna start from I don't know they're gonna start from China, and they're gonna go through Xinjiang, and then they're gonna go through Kazakhstan, all those countries, through Russia. I don't know if they don't go, they don't pass through Mongolia to Russia, but what have you, Iran, Turkey, Russia, and then into Germany, that's Holland and Italy. And then the maritime route, which will go from the south of China into India, Sri Lanka. That port that I was talking about, this is the one. Into South Sudan. Is that South Sudan? I don't know. This country here. Into Greece and in Italy.
a seeming attempt to expand the scope of its immediate influence. If China were to become more self-sufficient and even partially cut itself off from active participation in international activities, the Belt and Road system would allow China to continue playing a major role in Afro-Eurasia at no great cost to itself. Firstly, because of how much more closely integrated the region would become and thus more dependent upon each other, and especially upon powerhouses like China, who, secondly, because they are such powerhouses, would passively attract commerce and investment from all across the old world, almost returning China to its Qing dynasty economic strategy, only now with a passive Europe and the whole of Africa right at its fingertips. Regardless of whether or not the United States experiences a major crisis which knocks it off the pedestal of global hegemon, China, if it succeeds in accomplishing its stated goals, will likely become the leading superpower of the old world in a matter of decades.
That's true.
Domestically, China has proven very capable.
Especially in the old world, like the whole world, will China be the only superpower? I doubt it. America won't just collapse, year by year. But I think they will be able to take over Europe because Europe is extremely decentralized with the European Union and extremely divided. People don't think about it, but it is. I mean, it's not as unified, even as powerful as it was. I mean, what are the true superpowers of? I'm sorry, of the EU? You have Germany and France. That's it. Anything else is what, Italy, maybe. You know. So especially now that the UK has bounced.
Of suppressing internal dissent and rebellion, enforcing strict order among the population, and rooting out political rivals in government, suggesting that it can maintain a stable status quo for the foreseeable future. Now, China's population growth has slowed down. It is believed that peak growth has been reached for at least the next 2 decades, and a two-child policy has been enacted in an attempt to regain lost momentum and reach population numbers necessary to sustain a large youthful workforce. However, even if this fails to meet expectations, as some statistics appear to indicate, this likely wouldn't be as catastrophic a setback for the PRC as some have made it out to be, especially if significant progress is made in automation, freeing up a plentiful amount of manpower for the country to put to better use. China does appear to have a large incoming aging population with much fewer youth to support them, but once again China's strategy of automating low-skilled jobs and shifting toward tech would be an excellent way to solve this crisis before it even happens. Abroad, as a consequence of its high production capabilities and historic aim of independence from foreign influence, China has succeeded in becoming a tremendous, nearly self-sustaining economic body who has caught almost every country in Asia and the Pacific within its orbit, perhaps most concerningly the United States itself, around whom orbits the rest of the West. The United States, with its domestic manufacturing down in the gutter, has racked up a massive trade deficit, importing far more products than it's exporting, the majority of those products coming from China, raising American dependency upon China's economy while making the Chinese all the richer. However, global skepticism of China is on the rise, and understandably so. China has demonstrated repeated disregard for global institutions and mandates, has shown increasing belligerence over the past decade, and has repeatedly soured relations with its European and Asian partners. Even Russia refuses to deeply invest itself in China, knowing that the Chinese will discard them at the first opportunity, and given the growing disparity between the two powers, that may come sooner than later. Yet even despite rising skepticism of China, business with the PRC continues steadily, several nations desperately seeking an alternative to Chinese economic leadership but finding none. Given that trend, unless active measures are taken by the US or some coalition of anti-China great powers to revive their domestic industry, cut back dependency on Chinese goods, and offer the world a viable alternative to Chinese leadership, it'll only be a matter of time before the globe spins on the Chinese axis. What does bring some of these conclusions into question is the fact that China does have a habit of skewing statistics and inflating numbers to produce an illusion of growth, especially in regard to its military and economy. However, all information present does suggest China is seizing the opportunities left open to it, but those—
Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen with China, but the world economy is so intertwined with the Chinese, and there's so many possibilities to make a lot of money that I don't see. Even if the countries, as of themselves, try to sort of distance themselves from China in any way, shape, or form, unless they issue a ban of businesses doing business with China, I don't see China ever becoming being. I don't even think if it's possible to decouple itself from uh, from the world economy at this point. You know, they've grown so much. Anywho, I hope you enjoyed this video. This was a very interesting video. I hope you enjoyed my insight. Uh, and I'll start doing a lot more videos on geopolitics. I hope you like them. Like and maybe type a comment, subscribe. You know, so this helps. And I'll see you guys in the next one. See ya.